So trying to come up with ideas to explain inheritance through code, the best idea I could come up with is sports. And what better sports teams than my two favorite, the Pittsburgh Steelers and my hometown, AFC Bournemouth, who are currently in the Premier League. Not too good, but in the Premier League. So we are going to use this as an example. And the reason I'm doing this, besides promoting my hometown soccer team, is that sports, if you think of a sports team, American football and British football or soccer, pretty much completely different sports, right? In one you're throwing a ball, and one you're kicking the ball. Soccer has no touchdowns. Um, American football, you can touch the ball, and soccer you cannot. Like, they're very different sports. The amount of people on a team, the positions, completely different things. But they are both sports. Because they are both sports, although they are different sports, different teams, different leagues, different countries, they are still sports, meaning that they do inherit certain things. So let's put this into code to show you how two very different sports teams can inherit from a sports team class. So here we are in NetBeans, and I'm going to start out by making a Java class. This is going to be our superclass, or our parent class, which soccer and football will extend from, or inherit from. This is going to be what the two sport teams do have in common. So although they are very different, what do they have in common is that they are both a sports team. So if we create this class, not a main class, just a regular Java class, we will get something that looks like this. And now we can just define what a sports team is. So first of all, let me make a note up here that this is our superclass, or our parent class, which other classes will derive from. From chapter 9 and 10, we know that classes like this require a few things, sorry. Let's say that if you are a sports team, despite what sport you belong to, if it's hockey or football or soccer or basketball, no matter what team you belong to, you are probably in a sport, right? No matter what it is a sport. You will probably have another string for team name, and you'll probably have an int for your date founded. So of course sports share more than this, but to keep it as simple as possible, we'll just say these three things. So despite what sports team we're talking about, they belong to a sport, be it hockey, soccer, football, basketball, golf, whatever it may be. They have a team name. Again, doesn't matter what kind of sport you are, you probably have a team name. And then you have a date your team was founded. They will all have this in common. So let's start defining this class. Let's create a default constructor. So here is our default constructor. And then let's define an overloaded constructor. So we can say, if you are a sports team, you should probably have a string of your sport, which is string s. You should have a string of your team name, tn, and you should have an int of your date founded. We can just do our generic private equals public on these, like so. So when we invoke this overloaded constructor, what happens is the s that the user passes will be given to the variable sport, the tn will be given to team name, and this d will be given to date founded. Then all we need are some accessor and mutator methods, or setters and getters, for the only purpose, which is to get these variables outside of this class. Remember the messenger example I've given you in class before? We need to get these private variables outside of this class. So just setters and getters. If you remember the shortcut, feel free to use that way, but I will just write them out for you. Public string get sport is just going to simply return sport. Public void set sport will take a string of sport and say sport equals sport. Let's see. The issue here is that this should probably be SP to tell the difference between the global variable and the local variable. And then we'll just keep going down. So public string get team name will return team name. Public void set team name will take a string of tn, and we will say team name equals tn, private equals public. The last one will be public int get date founded, which just returns the date founded, and public void set date founded, which takes a integer of d and assigns date founded to that integer. So this should look pretty similar to what we've seen before, right? We have a default constructor that doesn't do anything. We don't have to worry about this. Some private variables. We have an overloaded constructor, which assigns your private to public. We have some setters and getters for each. Remember, it doesn't matter which way you write these. So I could have just as easily done set sport, get sport, set sport. Same thing, because it matters in which the order they are called, if they are called. We will then make a toString method, so public string toString, to define how a sport should be printed. So we could say something like return team name of team name, which has a sport of sport and a founded date of date founded. So if you tried to print a sports team, you would be printing team name, sport, founded on this date, using the toString method. So this class right here defines what it means to be a sport. We're not defining what sport it is, if it's hockey, football, soccer, basketball. It's just a generic sport. It has a sport, a team name, a date founded. But what if we want to get a little more specific with what sport or what team we are talking about? Well, we can do that. So what we can do is we can make a Java class, this again, just a Java class, and we are going to call this football. So this is a football class, again, no main method, just football. And before we do anything, what we're going to do here is we are going to say that this is a subclass, or a child, and to make that happen, this football class is going to be a child of the sports team class, because a football team is a sports team. In order to do that, we are going to use the keyword up here, extends, and then write sports team. So public class football extends sports team. What this does is this says that football is a child, it inherits everything sports team has. So although football is currently empty right now, it actually has access to everything over in sports team because sports team is its parent. It's inheriting from that. Football is a subclass of the superclass sports team. So let me walk you through that as we go through this file. We again can make a default constructor that doesn't really have to do anything. We will then make a overloaded constructor like this, and we will say that if you have a football team, well, before we fill out our football overloaded constructor, let's think about what does a American football team have that a generic sports team doesn't have? What does an American football team have that a English soccer team doesn't have? What does an American football team have that an American hockey team doesn't have? Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is if you win the American Football League, you will win the Lombardi Trophy, right? So let's say that is the difference. That is what a football team would have, that a generic sports team or any other team would not have. So we can make a private int variable up here, and we can say Lombardi's, just like this. Because we're talking about the Steelers, or we will be, they have 6, so we'll assign that to be 6 for now. But we'll say, if you create this football class, then what you need to do is you need to give me a string of the team's name, an int of the date it was founded, and an int of L, L meaning Lombardi's. So we could make variables. We could say like private equals public, just like we did over in sports team, right? Private, public, private, public, private, public. But why do that when football is a child of sports team? It inherits from it. Therefore, we could do something like we could say, if you create a football object, we know that the sport is football. So we can just use the setSport method and set the sport to football. There's no reason to ask the user what type of sport they're in because they have made a football object, right? So there's no question there. But the confusing thing here is this is my entire class. See me scrolling up and down? There is no setSport method here. So why don't I have a red line? That's because football extends sports team, therefore it can use any of these methods, such as setSport, without having to create an object of sports team, because football is a sports team. So that is just a little bit of the power of inheritance. We could also do something like name equals n, but why would we do that when we could just say set team name equals n, set date founded equals passing it d, and Lombardi's we will have to assign private to public. So see here, when we create or when we invoke an overloaded constructor of football, we pass n, d, and l. For the sport, we just assign it to be football. The user has no choice there, because this is the football class. Of course, the sport will be football. For team name, we use the setTeam method, which is derived from the sports team class. Because it is inherited, we can use that, passing it n, which is what the user gave us. Set date founded, we take d, which is what the user gave us for the date founded, and l for Lombardi's. That is whatever they gave us will be assigned here, and that will actually override the 6, so I believe we don't need the 6 at all. The only other thing we need to do for football is we need to be able to get the Lombardi's and set the Lombardi's, right? So we could say public int get Lombardi's simply returns that variable, and then public void set Lombardi's. We'll take an integer of L and assign our private to public. Okay, so this is our entire football class. I believe I can get this on the screen for you. There it is. So our football class is a lot shorter than it usually would be, because we didn't have to create a method for setSport, we didn't have to create a method for setTeamName, we didn't have to create a method for setDateFounded. It was all inherited from sports team. So imagine if we made more different types of sports, which we're about to, it's going to save us a lot of time in the long run. So let's move on to making a soccer team. I'm going to go up to File, New File, and we're going to make another Java class, just a regular Java class here. And we are now going to make a soccer team. So call this soccer, clean up our code a little bit. We still don't have a main method. At this point, we have 3 different files which will be talking together with no main method. Now soccer can extend sports team again. That immediately allows us to inherit everything that sports team has to offer, and we do. Um, what is different between a football team, a generic sports team, and a soccer team? Well, if we're talking about English Premier League soccer, you win something called the Premier League title. So before we start this, we will say private int PLT for Premier League title. That's how many trophies our team has. And then we can just move on with the generic creation of the constructors, like this. We will have an overloaded one, much like we did for the football team. And this will take a string n, an int d, and an int, we'll say p for Premier League title. We can use the setSport method to say soccer. Remember, we don't have to create an object of sports team because soccer extends sports team. It has access to that setSport method, just like football does, because they are both sports teams. It is the power of inheritance. We can then use setTeamName, passing n, which is the name they gave us. We can call setDateFounded, passing d. And since PLT is exclusive to the subclass soccer, we can assign that to our local variable here. Continuing on with this, we just need a setter and getter for our PLT variable. So public int get, let's just say get PLT, will return PLT. Public void set PLT will take, that will take a integer of p, and we will assign our private to our public, like so, and there we go. So now, we have our sports team, which is a generic sports team, no particular sport, but it will have a sport, a team name, a date founded, and it has all of its setters and getters for all of those things, as well as a toString on how to print it. We then have our football team, which inherits a sports team, because a football team is a sports team. The only difference is football teams win the Super Bowl, right? They win Lombardi trophies, so we have that specialized subclass variable here that sports team does not have. That is the only difference. We can use methods that are derived from sports team, such as setSport, setTeamName, and dateFounded, because we have extended from that class, therefore we have access to all of those methods. And the same thing is true for soccer. The only difference is soccer has a integer called PLT, Premier League titles, instead of Lombardis. So next we're going to make a demo class to run this and see how it works, and then we'll take it one step further. So we are going to now make the demo class. That will be a Java main class. So go ahead and make that with me, Java main class, and we are going to call this test sports team. Test sports team. This will have a main method. So at this point, we are actually going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 files working together. At this point in the semester, this is as many files as we've ever had working together at once. So what I want to do is we are going to create a couple of objects. Let's create a football object. So football Steelers equals new football. We know when we create a football object, we have to, if we don't invoke the default constructor, then we are to give a n, a d, and an l, meaning the name, the date, and the Lombardis. We don't have to give it a sport or a set sport because that will default to football when this constructor is invoked. So let's give it a name of Steelers, a date founded of 1933, and Lombardis is 6. Let's then go ahead and make soccer AFC Bournemouth, or your favorite team, soccer AFC Bournemouth 1899 and 0. So I made Steelers, which is a football team, and Bournemouth, which is a soccer team. What we could do now is I could prove to you that if I say Steelers, period, I get access to the get Lombardis and the set Lombardis, but I don't get access to the set sport, get sport, set team name, get team name. I don't have access to all of those because although test sports created as a football and soccer object, they're not directly derived, they don't directly inherit sports team like soccer and football do, right? So in soccer, we could access those methods, but in test sport, we cannot. But what we can do is, I believe if we were to just print Steelers right here, we get this output. Team name, Steelers, sport, football, founded 1933. So where is this coming from? Because inside of football, we don't have a toString method. We never define how to print a football object. If we come over to sports team, you will see in sports team, we did have a toString method on how to define a sports team. Let me come back over here and let me print my object of AFC Bournemouth. Let me put a blank line between the two. See how these both printed in the same format. Team name, team name, team name, team name, sport, 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 founded, 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 founded. That's because when we created Steelers based on football, football said, I don't have a toString method to print, but my parent sports team does. So if you try to print Steelers, it will go inside of the football class, try find the toString method, which does not exist, and then it will go one step higher into the sports team class, find the toString method, and print that. The same thing happens for soccer. We try to print AFC Bournemouth, so it goes to soccer, tries to find the toString method, of which there is none, so then it goes one step higher to its parent class of sports team, finds the toString method, and prints toString, which is what we're seeing here. Now, what if we wanted it to print something a little different? Well, we could do that as well. So inside of football, I could make another toString method, and then this would be called, but we'll learn about that in overriding and overloading. Instead, what we are going to do is we are going to create some separate methods, much like set Lombardis and get Lombardis, that are exclusive to football and exclusive to soccer. Because if you think about it, although you would print various teams the same like this, when you print a football team, you probably want to print how many Lombardis they have. And when you print a soccer team, you probably want to print how many Premier League titles they have. So this toString method of the superclass isn't the most ideal way to do. But if we instead came in football and we wrote public string, and we named it something like print football, then what we can do is we could print something along the lines of, or let's make this a void method. So we could do void, and we could do a system.out.println. We could say get team name is a, let me pause here for a second. Why does this work? Get team name is not inside of football, right? We covered this about 10 minutes ago when we first introduced you to inheritance, but get team name is actually calling the superclass get team name. And because football and soccer both derive from the sports team superclass, they both have access to that. So we can say get team name is a get sport team, maybe sports, yes, get sports team, founded on get date founded with get Lombardis and then finally Lombardis. So get team name is a get sports team founded on get date founded with get Lombardis. This is how we would print football. I'm going to copy this method and bring it over to soccer and just make a couple of changes. this will now be called print soccer. Everything should be the same, but instead of Lombardi's, we're going to say get PLT and print PLT here. But the reason I copy and pasted is they were so similar. The only difference is PLT rather than Lombardi's. So now, over in test sports team, if I didn't want to print the generic team name sport founded, we could comment this out and instead print something along the lines of system.out.println, and we could say Steelers, period, print football, or it's a void method, so we wouldn't even need to put this in a system.out.println. We could just call it like this, and this should, Steelers is a football team founded on 1933 with 6 Lombardis. We have a couple of spacing issues, nothing too crazy to worry about. I believe it's here, and this one. So now Steelers is a football team founded on 1933 of 6 Lombardis. If we then took our AFC Bournemouth object and used print soccer, it prints that. Now if we did want to print the generic toString, we could just print Steelers like we did before, and you can still do that. But if you want to make it a little more detailed to the sport you're talking about, you can just put that type of method, print football, in your football class, and print soccer in your soccer class, and access it as need be. It should go without saying, but Steelers cannot access print soccer, right? It can only access print football, and AFC Bournemouth cannot access print football, it can only access print soccer, because they don't have anything in common with each other. Soccer is soccer, football is football. The only thing they share in common is that they are both sports teams. So they share all of this in common, but none of this, and none of this. So that is inheritance. This is quite a long video. Feel free to rewind it, rewatch it, ask me questions. This is the concept of inheritance. Hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. We will be covering it more as we go through this. The next few things we're going to do are going to be regarding the super keyword, and we will get into things such as constructors, variables, methods, and that type of thing.